Hello and welcome to this edition of Dynamic CISO Talk Show. My name is Rahul Neelmani, Founding Director, Greyhead Media and Vice President, Community Engagement and Editorial for ISLG Group. We have the pleasure of having with us today a very special guest, Amit Pradhan, one of India's brightest cybersecurity professionals that I have had the chance to interact with. Amit currently works as the director for India, SAARC, and Japan for Mandiant, which was earlier a FireEye company, now acquired by Google. Amit is a very accomplished CISO who worked as EVP, Technology Security, CTSO, and Chief Privacy Officer at Vodafone earlier. And even prior to that, he was the CISO of Cipla, which was a pharma major. So with this background, welcome to the show, Amit. It's a pleasure to have you with us. How are you doing?
Thank you, Rahul, and good afternoon. And thank you for having me here. I'm happy to be here.
Great. So let's begin the conversation right away. In this age, when a cybersecurity incident takes many months to get detected, what's the significance of dwell time by the hackers or the nation-state actors, and how does that impact the organization's data, networks, and overall cybersecurity deterrence?
So let me start by explaining what is dwell time. Right? So dwell time is number of days an attacker is present in a victim environment before they get detected. Right? And there are essentially two avenues of detecting such incidents. Detection can be external by way of notification by a third party and external agency, or it can be internal, like self-detection through a SIM or your own team. And the median represents a value at the midpoint of a data which is sorted out by magnitude, right? And that is where we use this term called median dwell time, or rather, when we talk about the global, it is global median dwell time. Or for ease of use, I can say GMDT, right? Okay. Now, dwell time plays a very critical role when we look at the current global scenario, right, in terms of what is happening. So if you look at what is happening, right, the modern threat landscape, as we know, it continues to expand, right, it becomes more complex. Cyber attacks related to the conflicts of Ukraine are surging. And what is the significance? They are giving us an indication of the pace of advancement in these attacks that we see. On the organization side, right, we see critical and pervasive vulnerabilities like Log4j, right, which have led to a massive risk due to complexity in patching. Patching is such a simple process, but when we do it at an organization level, it becomes very complex. Cyber criminals, now they have started conducting sophisticated ransomware and extortion operations worldwide, and we see them very often now in the media. And in this scenario, right, one of the critical measurement of a cyber attack is the dwell time, right? Now, it helps us basically understand the life cycle of an attack, and somewhere it also helps us understand the magnitude of risk that we as an organization face. Now, the M-Trends 2022 report released by Mandiant, right, it highlights how GMDT, right, the time from compromise to discovery, it dipped from 21 days to 21 days from 24 days from the previous reporting period, right? And as such, the 3 weeks global median dwell time is a great milestone, right? We feel it's good. But a determined attacker we've seen, it takes very few days for him to reach their objective. So overall, the organization must still continue to remain vigilant and ready to respond.
No, wonderful. And, while we understood how critical the dwell time is and how important it is for the organizations to understand and react to it, as you very briefly mentioned, and that was my next point of conversation with you, the recent M-Trends report of 2021, which highlights about the reduction in global median dwell time from 24 days in 2020 to 21 days in 2021. I would like to understand what does that signify and how, according to you, has this reduction happened, and what are the upsides of this reduction?
So we made 3 observations with respect to GMTD. right? So the first was overall the GMTD reduced by 13%, right, from 24 days to 21%. However, the dwell time, the GMTD, for externally identified reported incidents, right, they dropped from 73 to 28. So earlier, 2020 was 73 days, and now it's 28, which is actually a remarkable change.
Right.
And the GMTD, right, for internally identified incidents, they increased from 12 days to 18 days. Now, for externally identified incidents, the reduction of GMTD from 73 to 28, it can be attributed to largely three reasons, right? So one is there is a major improvement in detection capabilities of external agencies, right? We see more established communication and outreach programs for reporting, for disclosures in the organizations and in the country. Increased collaboration with the government and the industry bodies.
Yeah.
Compared to that, for internally identified incidents, right, we observed an increase from 12 to 18 days, which appears to be a bit disappointing fact from a security posture perspective. But if we compare the GMTD of 28 days of external versus 18 days of internal detections are much more faster by 36%. So we continue to be better even with those internal detections. So why is that? Now, if you look at various factors, essentially behind reducing the dwell time, some of them can be significant improvement in the detection capabilities by organizations, right? By adoption of advanced products like EDR, SIM, right? XDRs. Yeah. Vendors, third parties have started proactively engaging with each other to share threat information. There are a lot of threat intel being shared among communities. Threat intelligence has definitely improved across the government and the industry verticals. Government, in fact, is taking taking cybersecurity much more seriously than what we saw year before last.
Yes.
And finally, I would say even organization maturity has increased in terms of understanding cybersecurity as a risk, and management involvement has increased. However, there's one more factor why we see these numbers reduce, and that is primarily because of ransomware attacks. Okay. Now, ransomware attacks have significantly low dwell time, as low as 5 days, which essentially means a ransomware attack materializes within 5 days and the news is out. Okay. Now, this is because the attacker is highly motivated, right? He has very clear target of stealing, extortion. And that is also the reason why ransomware attacks, they get reported very early because they get executed pretty early.
Absolutely.
And last year, globally, we observed significant increase in ransomware attacks. And this again has significantly impacted the global median dwell time, right, in terms of bringing it down.
No, I got your point. And the last point that you mentioned about the increase in the number of ransomware attacks and therefore the impact on the global median dwell time has reduced is a reality because impact, not just the impact from the beginning to the end, the life cycle of a ransomware attack is very short, and therefore it naturally has come down. So Amit, besides the exploits, supply chain compromise accounted for most intrusions in 2021, and I'm referring to the same M-Trend report, compared to less than 1% in 2020. What changed in just 1 year's time? How has this surge taking place, and where have organizations gone wrong, or is it something that is beyond the control of the security organizations?
Supply chain attacks are very interesting attacks, right? Supply chain attacks are targeted on victims not for who they are, right, but whom they connect to. Right? The final victim is not the primary victim in these attacks, but the final victim are those multiple organizations with which the primary victim connects to. These attacks, I don't know if you know, are also called living of the land attacks in some cases. Right? This concept was introduced in 2013 by two gentlemen, Christopher and Matt. Right? But coming back, right, the biggest motivation for supply chain attack is very simple and powerful. It is obtaining a single point of entry that provides ability to reach out to multiple organizations at the same time instead of targeting each of these individually. In terms of what we observed last in 2020, most of the supply chain compromises, intrusions, right, were related to SolarWinds breach, and we all know that, right? It was a massive breach, right, with Sunburst as the threat actor that was used. Sunburst was observed almost in 9% of all investigations that we did at Mandiant in 2021, and Sunburst was delivered across the globe through a malicious update, resulting in widespread of compromise access. Now, what makes these attacks viable for the attackers? It is increased connectivity and the integrated networks which are prevailing now between customers, service providers, and third parties. Right. That has increased. As such, supply chain attacks are very difficult to identify, to detect, because what do you do when you have a binary signed by an OEM, right, certified by an OEM, coming in with a malware in it, right? It's very difficult for any antivirus, any security product to detect it. But there are certain things that can be done, right? So for an example, organizations must improve their vigilance about ICS systems, the industrial control systems, right? The OT systems. And this is because we've seen 1 in 7 extortion attacks. The attacks are about operational technologies. Right? Now, apart from maintaining a strong diligence on vendor posture and vendor practices, security practices, I think organizations also need to now start relying more on detection and response, much more than just relying on prevention of these attacks. Because you might not be able to prevent this, but the chances of you detecting the symptoms when an attack materializes goes up. So I think that's one area that definitely CISOs can do.
No, exactly, and we all understood. I mean, I had a long conversation with the CISO of SolarWinds, and he was pretty appreciative of the efforts made by FireEye to rake up the issue in time, and therefore they could contain that where it could have otherwise been very disproportionate and could have gone in very, very different direction. So coming on to how Mandiant tracks the malware families, the M-Trend report that we are referring to during our conversation says that Mandiant began tracking over 700 new malware families during 2021. And this number, to me, it refuses to decline. And it's a growing menace that we are all suffering from. With every new malware family comes unique challenges for the CISO and security leaders. And if this trend is irreversible, what should the CISO be doing to safeguard from these lethal malware attacks?
So yes, the malware families have gone up in numbers, right? And in fact, not only have they gone up in numbers, but the sophistication of these malwares have increased, right? Malwares are more advanced now, more stealthy and difficult to detect. So the traditional antivirus programs or EDR solutions, they do not provide the same level of assurance as earlier with these malwares, advanced malwares coming in. However, in most of the incidents, the malware is used only to get an initial foothold into the organization. Once the attacker gets that, the attacker subsequently targets to exploit privileged credentials for all the further activities. Because even for an attacker or an adversary, carrying a payload, a malware, across the organization makes him much noisy and makes him prone to get detected. So usually the technique is more getting an initial foothold with a malware and then exploiting the legitimate credentials and then doing all the activities with these credentials. In terms of what a CISO can do to enhance the protection, there are a few things, right? So the first and the foremost thing everybody knows, right? I mean, we need to establish good security practices, and more importantly, a strong security sensitive culture in the organization. Right? I mean, that's something we all know, but we implement it at a very different effectiveness levels. CISOs must definitely leverage on intelligence and detect these malwares at an early stage. In terms of malware infections, the chances of you detecting them at the early stage are high, and that is how you will be able to prevent much more impact that they do. Also, it would be helpful if the CISOs recognize their critical assets and the potential impact to these, and they prioritize these compared to other non-critical assets. Point is, you can't protect everything with the same priority, with the same focus. So somewhere the prioritization is absolutely critical. Also, CISOs need to start improving their focus on monitoring and detection and response capabilities, and just not rely on prevention. Prevention is probably a hygiene factor that is needed in a security, but for absolute protection, more for stronger protection, detection and response is important. And lastly, I would say the focus on speed of response is also important. How quickly can you contain a malware attack? How fast can you rebuild a system? And how strongly can you remediate the situation with a malware attack is what will determine, the strength of the security posture for this organization.
A lot of things that you said are, I mean, very relevant and should be done. But I mean, they also are dependent on how empowered the security organization is, and how much do they have at their disposal to adopt new technologies and the best practices. Do you think that also becomes a hindrance, or just a strong culture and awareness can take care of a lot of things?
Absolutely. So adoption of right technologies, right, distributing the efforts and focus across prevention, detection, and response capabilities, right? Strong skill sets in the team to actually own up the various security functions. These are all important. Apart from being, security sensitive and knowing, having the right policies in place. Operationally, of the level of capabilities definitely need to increase in all the organizations today, whether it comes to detection or response to any of these incidents.
Correct. So moving on to an interesting aspect, Amit, that you touched upon very briefly in the beginning of our conversation is about the increase, or I would say a great increase in the nation-state attack activities, and what we are seeing currently in the realm of Russia-Ukraine conflict. And it is not just confined to these two nations. I mean, any nation which is involved directly or indirectly in this conflict is a victim of nation-state attacks. Targets of cyber espionage are not chosen at random. They are carefully selected and derived from the priorities taken from official government material, such as the 5-year plans, domestic and national defense white papers, and other policy documents and platforms. How can countries like India and organizations based in India counter the sophistication of nation-state actors? Are we equipped well, or are we far from the target?
So all those countries which have either border disputes or aspire business or national dominance over others are indulged in national stage attacks. And it definitely includes countries like China, Russia, Eastern European countries, right? There's no one country which dominates all, right? I mean, it is more of a geopolitical environment that exists across. Sometimes we have observed multiple attackers in an environment, right? And only after a comprehensive investigation, we are able to identify that there were multiple actors, right? While the impact was single. So for an example, right? So there is a threat actor A that is involved only to get the initial access or foothold into an organization. And then there is a threat actor B from another country, which provides the malware. And then there is a threat actor C, again from a different country, who orchestrates this attack and engages with the victim for any ransom or extortion. And in these cases, it becomes increasingly difficult for anybody to attribute a cyber attack to a single country or a single threat actor. Ransomware as a service is becoming quite popular in the dark web, deep web, the underworld, right, of cyber, and is a typical example where this model is used very widely by attackers. It is also very true that, as you said, right, targets of cyber espionage or advanced attackers are not chosen at random. In fact, they are carefully selected, planned, and they are delivered with precision and persistence. They need both precision and persistence, right, to counter the defenses. Coming to your question in terms of where does India stand, I believe countries like India, they have a lot of work to do and a long way to go when it comes to national cybersecurity as a problem. And this starts right from making the right national policies. How do you effectively enforce them? Do you have governing entities, institutions to ensure that these policies are being followed? Do you have a judicial and a law enforcement system, right, institutionalized to execute this? But having said that, in the last few years, there have been several initiatives I see that the government of India has taken, like establishment of CERT-in, which has been around for quite a long time, and CERT-in is empowered by under IT Amendment Act 2008, right? So it's a legal directive, right? So whatever CERT-in says has to be accepted by our organizations. Establishment of NCIIPC, which is National Critical Infrastructure Information Processing Center, right? This institute is responsible to identify and protect national critical infrastructure companies, right? Establishment of NCCC, which is National Cyber Coordination Center, right? Also, we've seen a lot of inclusion of data privacy and protection has been done by regulators and statutory bodies in various industry verticals, right? In fact, we recently see a lot of mandatory disclosures, penalties, and procedures to address violations are being talked about in the industry, right? So I think overall, we are going in the right direction. Just like any other organization, right? A nation too has security capabilities to improve and maturity to improve, right? And I think India is in the right direction so far.
No, great to know. And you said it that when the intent is right and when you put these pieces together, right, from CERT-in to NCIIPC to NCCC, and enforcement happens with the right intent and also forcefully, sorry to say that, but it has to be forcefully, things should become better. So coming on to my last point of conversation, where we will sum up this whole discussion. So what's your advice to the CIOs and CISOs who are working to strengthen their security posture? And let me put a caveat that it is always a moving target. It is never a static target because the attackers are evolving, and the security posture also has to evolve. But having said that, with the limited visibility and budgets, how can the CISOs and CIOs maximize their efforts in creating a better cybersecurity posture?
Absolutely. See, having been on the other side, being a CISO myself for so many years, right? I can tell you, right, there are 4 areas which probably the CISOs and the CIOs need to focus, right? The first area is the correct perception. And I believe the biggest change required for any CISO is the change in the way we look at cybersecurity as a problem. So for an example, it is not if or whether an organization can be targeted. It is rather when it will be targeted. Right? And only after a wholehearted acceptance of the statement will the organization starts their true journey towards building an effective business plan, right? A protection plan. It is also not only how good you are in your prevention technologies, right? But equally or rather more so, how good are you in your detection and response capabilities? There is a simple example that I use, right, when I talk to customers, and it goes like this, right? So it is not whether you will be shot at or not, right? It is how many bullets can you take without being significantly injured, and how quickly can you recover and respond. That is what will determine the state of security. And I think it's a concept, but I think if you imbibe that in your philosophy of your security functions, right, it really helps. The second is, and this is more practical, is considering relevance to your business, relevance to industry, geography, your attacker, when you think of security. Now, the real question, and it's like an example, right? How likely do you think is an adversary known to attack a manufacturing company or manufacturing industry in Russia likely to attack an Indian bank?
Absolutely.
Very low, right? Yeah. So knowing your true enemies is as important as knowing what defenses you need to build against them. And that is where prioritizing security initiatives, efforts, resources, budgets, right, to threats that are real and relevant to you helps. Yeah. And when I say relevant to you, I mean you as an organization, you operating in your specific industry vertical, your spread across few geographies where you are present, and your customer base that you have. So therefore, planning your defenses against these, with keeping the relevance in mind, will definitely help you optimize your investment. The third is getting intelligence and knowing how to use it in a timely and effective manner. Right? Organizations today have ample of intelligence feeds into them. Right? Every OEM, every SI gives some threat intel to them. How do you filter out those which are relevant to you, significant to you, and those which have potential, for you to avoid a material breach? And knowing is not good enough, right? I mean, you could know that there is an intel which is likely relevant to you. How can an organization act on those quickly and comprehensively, right? And it's a simple patch, but running it across thousands of servers is again a big task. Like determining exposure of an announcement of a new vulnerability and getting it patched. How do you improve your governance in ensuring that the patch is done with coverage and accuracy? Intelligence-led security assessment. They provide true picture and reduces generalization of risk. Right? I mean, we've got into this habit of generalizing all security risks, all applicable to us. Hence, knowing your adversary, right, knowing their TTPs helps you better focus and navigate your budgets and resources in the right direction. Right? Lastly, the fourth, right, is continuous validation. Now, as we have been repeatedly saying, right, the threat landscape keeps changing, but so does the technology landscape. Right? No company, no technology landscape is same in 2 points in time. Right? And that is what we called as an environment drift. Controls don't work as planned over time. Right? There is change in architecture, change in configuration, change in users who manage those devices. Configurations are not implemented as intended. Right? You see that vendors implement certain configurations during demonstrations or point of proof of contact, proof of value, POCs. But when they are actually implemented during production, there is a difference. Right? Product features keeps changing at much faster rate than the security configurations, right? Which creates a lag in security. Now, all these examples of environment drift, they make the environment different in 2 points in time. So continuous validation is one of the most powerful mechanisms to check what you believe is actually working or not. Right? It is a mechanism that allows you to check all layers of security against all known threat actors continuously, right? From a hygiene perspective, and thereby give you an assurance which is true and not a perceived one.
No, excellent. And I could do a recap of this last answer. right from having the right perception to ascertaining relevance and creating intelligence, and lastly, having continuous validation of what you are doing. I mean, none of these four elements you spoke about have any involvement of technology as such overtly. Um, this is all about how you strategize your security posture and how you deliver on it. In between, for sure, there are technology elements to be assigned in each of these four buckets, and that is how you will be able to help yourself. And frankly speaking, a combination that you have had from a CISO's background to a provider of intelligence and technology only can give this kind of recipe. So thank you very much, Amit. I enjoyed this conversation. It was very enlightening and great to have you on the show.
Likewise, Rahul, thank you very much for inviting me. It was a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you.